The NFL can get heated. You have professional athletes with a passion for the game who have egos the size of mountains. However, some fights have been a lot more intense than others. Today I wanted to go over my personal top NFL fights and hopefully take you on a walk down memory lane. Coming in at the last spot for me personally is Steve Smith versus Malcom Jenkins. Steve Smith is just built different. In a 2011 matchup against the Saints, he did what Steve Smith does best: make a ridiculous catch, break away from defenders, and stroll into the end zone like he owned it. But as he crossed the goal line, Saints safety Roman Harper hit him with a late, cheap shot, the kind of hit that usually gets flags, fines, and a little side-eye from the league office. Now, most guys would go after the dude who actually laid them out, not Steve Smith. He was so fired up after the play, and after flexing in the end zone like nothing happened, that when the scuffle broke out, he locked onto the first Saints jersey he saw. Unfortunately for Malcom Jenkins, that jersey belonged to him. Smith grabbed Jenkins, manhandled him like a rag doll, and threw him to the turf like he was settling a score that never existed. It was pure chaos. Punches thrown, players shoving, and Smith standing there like the last boss in an NFL brawl video game. The late hit that sparked the chaos came from safety Roman Harper, who leveled Smith well after he had already crossed the goal line for a touchdown. For that cheap shot, Harper was fined $15,000 by the NFL. Despite being the clear instigator of the full team melee that followed, Steve Smith was not fined or suspended. A bit shocking, considering he tossed Malcom Jenkins to the ground like a training dummy in the heat of the moment. The league seemed to view Smith's actions as reactive rather than malicious. Jenkins, for his part, didn't receive any discipline either, mostly because he just happened to be the unlucky Saint standing closest to a very angry Steve Smith. After the game, Smith brushed the incident off with classic bravado, saying, "It's football. It's a physical game. I got up, celebrated, and got hit. I guess Harper didn't like it. That's not my problem." Panthers head coach Ron Rivera backed his receiver, calling it a player standing up for himself and his team. In the end, the only real consequence was Harper's fine, and Smith adding another chapter to his long history of mixing elite receiver play with no-nonsense attitude. Sometimes blocking turns into brawling, and in a bitter NFC East rivalry game between Washington and the New York Giants, Santana Moss and Webster gave fans more than just hard-nosed football. They gave them a straight-up backyard brawl on national television. The fight broke out during what should have been an ordinary running play. Moss, Washington's veteran wide receiver known more for his speed than his fists, was assigned to block Giants cornerback Webster. But the two had been jawing all game, and when Moss got physical with the block, Webster didn't take it lightly. What happened next was a slow burn eruption. The play ended, but the shoving didn't. Webster escalated things by knocking Moss's helmet off, which in NFL terms is basically throwing down the gauntlet. Moss didn't hesitate. He cocked back and threw a punch right at Webster's face, turning a physical block into a full-on fistfight. Not to be outdone, Webster grabbed Moss and dragged him to the ground, as teammates from both sidelines rushed in to separate the two. It wasn't a quick scuffle, it was a chaotic moment that left fans and announcers stunned. What made it even crazier was the league's response. Despite the swinging, grabbing, and general loss of control, neither Moss nor Webster was ejected from the game. Both were hit with offsetting personal foul penalties, and that was it. Business as usual. The referees let them play on even though punches had been clearly thrown, but the NFL wasn't going to let it slide completely. After reviewing the footage, the league handed down $5,000 fines to both players for their roles in the incident. Some NFL fights happen in the heat of the game. This one happened before the national anthem. In one of the wildest pregame brawls in league history, Joey Porter of the Pittsburgh Steelers and William Green of the Cleveland Browns didn't even make it to kickoff before all hell broke loose. Roughly an hour before the game was set to start, both teams were going through warm-ups when Porter and Green crossed paths near midfield. Tensions were already high. This was a bitter AFC North rivalry, and both teams had a reputation for physical, no-nonsense football. But instead of just exchanging a few choice words and moving on, things escalated fast. Porter and Green started jawing, and according to reports, Green allegedly spit in Porter's face, which, in NFL terms, is about as disrespectful as it gets. That's all it took. Porter immediately started throwing punches, and Green fired back, sparking a legit fistfight right there on the field. Coaches and teammates had to pull them apart, but the damage was already done. Green ended up with a bloody lip, and both players were ejected from the game before it even began. A rare and embarrassing outcome for two starters. The NFL later stepped in and hit both players with $10,000 fines, not just for fighting, but for tarnishing the league's image in a nationally televised rivalry game. The incident was made even worse by the fact that the fight happened during a time meant for preparation and focus. Instead, the storyline of the day became two hot-headed players letting emotion override discipline and setting the tone for a game that was already expected to be chippy. For Joey Porter, known for his trash talk and aggression, it was another moment in a career full of intensity. For William Green, it was a stain on a game that could have been a chance to shine. Instead, both were left watching from the locker room, all because they couldn't keep it together before the first whistle. Not all NFL fights happen between players, and not all of them happen between opponents. One of the strangest and most infamous brawls in league history took place on the sidelines during a game between two coaches on the same team. Throughout the 1993 season, tensions were boiling over within the Houston Oilers coaching staff. Defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan, a grizzled old-school football mind known for building the '85 Bears defense, couldn't stand offensive coordinator Kevin Gilbride, who ran a high-octane run-and-shoot offense that Buddy thought was reckless and, in his words, stupid. For months, the two exchanged passive-aggressive jabs in the media and flat-out aggressive jabs in meetings. But it all came to a head in Week 17 against the New York Jets. Despite the Oilers leading 14-0 at the end of the first half, Ryan was furious that Gilbride continued to call passing plays instead of running out the clock. When one of those passes resulted in a fumble, Buddy Ryan lost it. As Gilbride walked toward the huddle, Ryan stormed over and threw a punch at him, catching him square in the jaw. Gilbride stumbled back, tried to retaliate, but players quickly intervened and separated the two coaches before it got even uglier. It was the kind of dysfunction rarely seen outside of a reality show. Two grown men, both in leadership roles, throwing hands on live television in front of their team. And yet, somehow, the Oilers went on to win the game, capping off a 12-game winning streak to end the regular season. The incident didn't result in any fines or suspensions, but it did become one of the most embarrassing sideline moments in NFL history. The punch symbolized a fractured coaching staff with a Hall of Fame caliber defense and a high-powered offense at war with each other. In the end, the Oilers flamed out in the playoffs and the team was blown up shortly after. But that punch, caught on camera for the world to see, remains the ultimate reminder that sometimes the worst fights don't come from the other team. They come from inside the building. The 2014 matchup between the New York Giants and St. Louis Rams was supposed to be a routine late-season game, but it turned into an all-out melee that showcased just how quickly things can spiral when tempers boil over. The chaos started when Rams linebacker Alec Ogeltree aggressively dragged rookie sensation Odell Beckham Jr. out of bounds after a play. And not just a normal push, it was a full-blown toss that looked more like a wrestling move than a football tackle. Beckham, never one to back down, immediately retaliated, shoving Ogeltree and letting him know he wasn't going to be manhandled without a response. That shove was the spark. Within seconds, players from both sidelines flooded the field, punches were thrown, helmets came off, and what started as a chippy game turned into a complete brawl. It got so out of hand that 3 players were ejected, including Giants defensive end Damon Trey Moore and Rams defensive lineman William Hayes. After the dust settled, the NFL came down hard with nearly $60,000 in fines handed out to players involved in the scrum. What made this fight so memorable wasn't just the scale of it, it was how fast it escalated and the fact that it centered around Odell Beckham Jr., who was still in the middle of his breakout rookie season. His highlight reel catches were making headlines, but so were his emotions. This was one of the first moments that showed Odell's fiery edge, and it certainly wouldn't be the last time he'd find himself in the middle of a defensive dust-up. In fact, this altercation was just a warm-up for even more infamous showdowns down the line. But in this moment, Rams versus Giants became less about football and more about chaos, with Beckham right in the center of it. In a 2017 clash between the Jacksonville Jaguars and Cincinnati Bengals, tensions boiled over in spectacular fashion just before halftime, and it all started with a little shove and a whole lot of ego. With seconds left in the second quarter, Bengals star wide receiver AJ Green gave Jaguars cornerback Jalen Ramsey a light push after a play. Ramsey responded by shoving Green to the ground, and that's when things exploded. Green, typically known for his calm demeanor, absolutely snapped. He put Ramsey in a headlock, dragged him down like it was MMA instead of the NFL, and started throwing punches while both teams stormed the field and turned it into a full-on melee. The pileup was immediate, chaotic, and completely out of control. Players were diving in, trying to either separate or escalate the situation, and officials had no choice but to eject both Green and Ramsey for fighting. What made the moment even crazier was how out of character it was for Green, a quiet superstar who rarely, if ever, showed that kind of emotion. Ramsey, on the other hand, had already built a reputation as one of the league's premier trash talkers and antagonists, and this altercation only cemented that legacy. After the game, both players gave wildly different accounts of what happened. Ramsey insisted he had gotten under Green's skin with his words, Psychological Warfare 101, and didn't understand why Green had reacted so violently. Green, meanwhile, expressed regret, saying he lost his cool and was just trying to defend himself after being disrespected. Despite the headlock and punches, neither player was suspended, which surprised just about everyone. However, the NFL did fine Green $42,000 for the incident, while Ramsey got off relatively light. The brawl was a defining moment in that game and in the narrative of both players. It showcased Ramsey's ability to get in opponents' heads, sometimes to the breaking point, and proved that even the most composed stars like AJ Green have limits. It also became one of the most viral moments of the season, not just for the fight itself, but for how fast it went from subtle shove to straight up street fight. In one of the wildest and most emotional moments of the 2024 NFL season, a game between the Houston Texans and Jacksonville Jaguars turned into a full-on brawl after Jaguars quarterback Trevor Lawrence was absolutely blasted on a late hit. With tensions already running high in a crucial AFC South showdown, the hit came at the worst possible time, right after Lawrence had released the ball and was completely defenseless. A Texans defender came in late and laid him out, sending Lawrence crashing to the turf in a heap. The hit looked dirty, the crowd erupted, and the Jaguars players lost it. Within seconds, offensive linemen charged in, shoving and swinging at Texans defenders as both sidelines began to empty. It was the kind of fight where no one even pretended to de-escalate. Helmets were ripped off, punches were thrown, and players were sent flying in every direction. What started as a late hit turned into a full-team melee, a rare, raw explosion of emotion in a league that usually prides itself on control and discipline. Flags flew everywhere, and after a long delay, several players were ejected from the game, including at least one from each team. The NFL hit multiple players with fines in the tens of thousands, and the league reviewed the film to determine whether any suspensions were warranted. While no suspensions were ultimately handed out, the hit on Lawrence and the massive response it triggered dominated headlines for the rest of the week. The moment became a flashpoint for both teams. For the Jaguars, it was a rallying cry, a sign they were willing to throw down for their franchise quarterback. For the Texans, it was a lesson in keeping aggression in check. And for the rest of the NFL, it was a reminder that sometimes all it takes is one reckless hit to turn a football game into an all-out war. When the New York Giants faced the Carolina Panthers in Week 15 of the 2015 season, the spotlight was firmly on one matchup, Odell Beckham Jr. versus Josh Norman. It was the league's flashiest receiver against one of its most outspoken shutdown corners, and the media hype leading up to the game was intense. Everyone expected fireworks, and they got them, just not the kind you'd usually find on a highlight reel. From the opening whistle, the two were jawing, shoving, and pushing after almost every snap. Norman, known for getting under receivers' skin, was doing just that, and Beckham, who had been relatively quiet on the stat sheet, was clearly getting frustrated. But things reached a breaking point in the second half when Beckham completely lost his composure. On one play, he charged back across the field and launched himself head first into Norman, helmet to helmet, with no regard for the actual ball or play. It was a blatant, dangerous hit, the kind of move that could have ended someone's season. Norman responded by getting in Beckham's face, and the two nearly came to blows before officials and teammates intervened. At one point, Norman even dropped a knee onto Beckham's head during a tangle on the ground. The referees tried to keep the situation from spiraling, but the two players kept going at it for the rest of the game, throwing hands, body slams, and full-speed shoves, almost as if football had taken a back seat to personal vengeance. Shockingly, neither player was ejected, despite multiple cheap shots, personal fouls, and a game-long personal vendetta playing out in front of millions. The NFL didn't let it it slide though. Beckham was hit with a $77,000 fine and suspended 1 game, while Norman was also fined over $25,000 for his part in the melee. The incident became one of the most infamous one-on-one battles in recent NFL history. What was supposed to be a showcase of elite talent turned into a grudge match, a psychological war that boiled over into actual violence. And while Beckham and Norman would face off again in future seasons, the raw intensity of their 2015 clash was never quite duplicated. It was the kind of fight that reminded fans, when elite players lose control, the game can turn into a street fight in shoulder pads. The 2017 brawl between the Denver Broncos and Oakland Raiders wasn't just a heat-of-the-moment fight, it was a grudge match, a full year in the making. The bad blood between Broncos cornerback Aqib Talib and Raiders wide receiver Michael Crabtree had been simmering ever since Talib snatched Crabtree's chain off his neck during a game the previous season. It was the kind of move that felt less like football and more like prison yard disrespect, and Crabtree clearly didn't forget. Fast forward to their rematch in 2017, and it didn't take long for things to explode. On just the second series of the game, Crabtree came off the line and blocked Talib all the way off the field, refusing to let up even after the whistle. The two crashed into the sidelines, fell to the ground, and then it was on. Helmets flew, fists swung, and the benches cleared as players from both teams rushed in to join the chaos. Amid the madness, Talib and Crabtree somehow broke free from the mob and squared up like it was Saturday night on pay-per-view. They threw multiple punches at each other in a no-helmet fist fight, a rare sight in the NFL. And because Talib's pettiness knows no bounds, he ripped Crabtree's chain off again, almost like it was part of some twisted annual tradition. Officials had no choice but to eject both players, and the NFL responded swiftly by handing each of them a 2-game suspension, which was later reduced to 1 game each after appeal. Still, the message was clear. This wasn't football anymore, it was personal. The Talib-Crabtree saga became one of the most infamous player feuds in recent memory. It wasn't about a dirty hit or a missed call. It was about ego, pride, and a gold chain. And it played out like a heavyweight title fight in the middle of an AFC West showdown. This wasn't just a fight, it was a statement, and it's cemented as one of the NFL's most unforgettable sideline brawls. One of the most shocking and violent moments in NFL history unfolded on national television in the closing seconds of a 2019 Thursday night football game between the Pittsburgh Steelers and Cleveland Browns. And it wasn't about the score. With just 8 seconds left in a game the Browns had already won, chaos erupted when Steelers quarterback Mason Rudolph and Browns star pass rusher Myles Garrett got tangled up after a late hit. Rudolph appeared to try to remove Garrett's helmet first, grabbing and tugging at his face mask in frustration. But Garrett responded with something no one saw coming. He ripped off Rudolph's helmet and, in one of the ugliest moments the league has ever seen, swung it like a weapon and smashed it into Rudolph's exposed head. The blow stunned everyone watching, players, fans, announcers, and set off an instant brawl. Steelers center Maurkice Pouncey immediately jumped to defend his quarterback, throwing punches and kicking Garrett while he was down. Browns defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi added fuel to the fire by shoving Rudolph from behind, sending him to the turf again. What had been a chippy physical game turned into an all-out melee in the final seconds. The aftermath was swift and severe. Myles Garrett was suspended indefinitely, which ended up being the remainder of the season and postseason, the longest suspension ever handed out for a single on-field act. Pouncey was suspended 3 games, later reduced to 2, and Ogunjobi got a 1-game suspension. Fines totaling over $500,000 were levied between the teams, including individual penalties for multiple players who were involved in the fracas or left the bench area. Garrett later claimed that Rudolph had used a racial slur during the exchange, an allegation the league said it could not confirm after investigation, though the claim added another layer of controversy to an already infamous moment. Regardless of who started it, the incident became the defining image of that NFL season, a brutal reminder that in a game built on violence, there are still lines you simply can't cross, and using a helmet as a weapon, that's one of them. The 2010 showdown between the Houston Texans and Tennessee Titans gave fans one of the most unforgettable player-on-player brawls in NFL history, a rare moment where a superstar wide receiver decided he'd had enough. Titans cornerback Cortland Finnegan already had a reputation for being one of the league's most irritating, instigating, and downright dirty defenders. He was the kind of player who thrived on poking, prodding, and pushing opponents until they snapped. And during this game, he picked the wrong target, Andre Johnson, one of the most respected and dominant wide receivers in the league. Throughout the game, Finnegan was up to his usual antics, trash talking, extra shoves after the whistle, and generally doing everything possible to get under Johnson's skin. But in the fourth quarter, Finnegan took things too far when he shoved his hands directly into Johnson's face mask, a move clearly designed to provoke. Johnson, normally the definition of calm and composed, finally lost it. He ripped Finnegan's helmet off and started throwing punches like he'd been waiting all season to do it. Finnegan's helmet flew and the two traded blows in a surreal moment. Two helmetless NFL players throwing hands in the middle of a live game. Teammates rushed in to separate them and officials quickly ejected both players. The crowd erupted, the broadcasters were stunned, and the NFL had itself a headline moment. In the aftermath, both Johnson and Finnegan were fined $25,000 each, but neither was suspended, which shocked many considering the violence and visibility of the incident. Still, Johnson came out of the moment with his image mostly intact, seen by many as having simply stood up to a known provocateur. Finnegan, on the other hand, solidified his place as one of the league's most notorious pests. The message was clear: you can only push Andre Johnson so far before he pushes back, with fists. And there you have it, the wildest, nastiest, most unforgettable brawls in NFL history. From helmet-swinging chaos to sideline sucker punches, these fights prove that sometimes football isn't just a contact sport, it's a full-blown combat sport. If you thought this was intense, wait until you see the carnage in our last video where we broke down the 10 worst injuries in NFL history. From career-ending hits to gruesome moments you'll wish you could unsee. Tap the link, brace yourself, and we'll see you there.